shocking arrivals from 7 majority Muslim countries. The ruling could come at any moment, and of course we'll bring you there live if it does. But first, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Just a short time ago, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals heard arguments from the Trump administration and the opposing states. Those would be Washington and Minnesota. We'll talk to a Republican critic of the travel ban in a second. But first, here's what just happened in court a minute ago.
Has the government pointed to any evidence connecting these countries with terrorism?
These proceedings have been moving very fast. The strongest point on that is that in 2015 and 2016, both Congress and the administration made determinations that these 7 countries posed the greatest risk of terrorism, and in doing so, restricted visa waiver to people who had even traveled to those countries over the last 5 or 6 years. The executive order relies on that determination.
Your Honor, the case law from this court and the Supreme Court is very clear that to prove religious discrimination, we do not need to prove that this order harms only Muslims or that it harms every Muslim. We just need to prove that it was motivated in part by a desire to harm Muslims. And we have alleged that.
How do you infer that desire if, in fact, the vast majority of Muslims are unaffected?
Well, Your Honor, in part you can infer it from intent evidence. I mean, there are statements that we've quoted in our complaint that are rather shocking evidence of intent to discriminate against Muslims, given that we haven't even had any discovery yet to find out what else might have been said in private. I mean, the public statements from the President and his top advisors reflecting that intent are strong evidence, certainly at this pleading stage, to allow us to go forward on that claim.
Well, New York Congressman John Faso is a Republican, newly elected, but he's also a critic of the president's order, saying it was neither well-drafted nor well-implemented. Congressman joins us here in the studio. Congressman, thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much.
So it's kind of hard to argue with well-drafted, well-implemented. Okay. You said this in a press release. This being any kind of restrictions on immigration from these countries, most effectively pursued through thoughtful and deliberate legislation. God bless you for suggesting a legislative answer, I think.
Yeah.
What would that legislation look like? What would the thoughtful legislation achieving this goal be?
Well, I think let's see what happens with the Court of Appeals. But
right.
I do think thoughtful legislation was done previously by Congress, where they identified those 7 countries, and they were worried about the fact that those countries did not have proper internal procedures to vet those people
right.
who were looking to come to the United States. Where I think the order went awry was when they were looking at people who had dual citizenship, people who had already had visas, who had already gone through a process. So I'm hopeful now that they will have a more deliberative process internally, and I think they're doing that, to fix the mistakes that were in the executive order. Now, if the court upholds the lower court decision, then this is going to last for a few weeks more, certainly maybe months more, while the Supreme Court ultimately considers this. But if the court rules, as I think they will, which is that the plaintiffs the 2 states don't actually have standing to bring this case, then I think it's incumbent upon the administration to fix the implementation. And I think they're on the way to doing that.
But why wouldn't it be incumbent upon the legislative branch to pass laws that have the same effect, which is to protect the country?
Well, we can very much do that. And I think first, Congress should have some hearings, do an inquiry into this. But clearly, the pattern over the last 50 years has been to give the president, the executive, under the law,
right.
wide powers to protect the national interests of the United States. And I would note, and some of the critics ignore this, President Obama made multiple decisions of this nature, not of the broad-reaching nature as President Trump did,